First of all, I like your background.
Yeah, I was hitting buttons and it ended up kind of happening, and then I joined, and here we are.
Nice. It was kind of like a random, like, happenstance kind of thing, and you're just like, all right, I'll go with it. Like, looks
Yeah,
good. Uh,
I hit a button and it popped up, and then I'm like, screw it. Couldn't get it to go away, so screw it.
you strike me as the kind of person that is not very OCD about things. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I try to be open to being spontaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. And I try and do the same thing, but sometimes if things get to be too messy, then I'll take the Jordan Petersonian kind of clean your room mentality and whatnot. Um, but all right, thanks for joining me. So everyone listening, this is a good friend of mine, Dal Tsu. Um, Met him on or from Pangburn University, is what is now called. We
okay.
have, much history with each other. As I told Don yesterday, it will inevitably happen where you and I have priors with each other. So, but I'm going to try and do my best to ask questions not revolving around those priors. Inevitably, it's going to happen. But we'll see where it goes. I don't have any questions planned out. Um, I have a few things in mind that I do want to talk about. One of them is God.
Nice.
One of them is language, um, morality, nihilism, and then we'll kind of see how the conversation evolves from there.
For sure.
Um, I've heard you say before, and automatically I go to my priors. I've heard you say before, everyone believes in the God, in my God, or how I define God, something along those lines.
Yeah.
What is your God that you believe everyone abides by or believes in or knows about, however you want to kind of paint that picture?
Appeals to or
Appeals
something.
to.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I tend to believe in a God that is indescribable and like beyond the ability to like fully articulate and maybe even experience directly. I would say, and God would be like God is truth in a sort of way, or God is like the noumena, as we the word that we like to use a lot.
I love to use that word. Yeah.
So it's like if you refer to a state of affairs, that state of affairs is like it is kind of what I'm talking about when I say God. You're describing God. So even if you say there is no truth, truth doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist where or when or what do you like in what context? That greater context. That's the thing that I'm appealing to when I talk about God. And so, like, to me, at least, I don't think it's conceptually possible to not somehow end up appealing to that thing that I'm trying to appeal to. And so yeah, that's why I'll say that. But I also don't provide it like this at this level. There's no description to God that actually applies, or maybe every description applies. And so it's like if you're coming at me from like a lot of people, I talk to a lot of atheists, and so they'll like come at me with, well, that's not a personal God or whatever, and I'm just like, yeah, no, that's not a personal God. This God is the evil in the world, the hurricanes, the child cancer, it is all of that. So it's like I just like
This is
give
very
all that up.
this is good. Yesterday, Don and I were talking about pragmatism, and I was saying in a way, I feel as though us pragmatists kind of smuggle in pragmatism where the theists will talk about God and kind of the unknown truth, whatever is the case, the state of affairs, however you want to call that kind of thing. And I wonder if that's the same thing that you are talking about. When you say state of affairs, I like to use this term along with noumena. whatever is the case. So, whatever is the case, independent of our appearances and our perception, there is a reality that we can't access. It's indescribable, it's inscrutable, ineffable. And I wonder if this is kind of what you're talking about when you talk about God. This, whatever is the case, capital O objective reality kind of thing.
Yep, that's that's how I would describe it. Yeah.
And I feel as though at least the language that Don Don and I, and you've heard us pragmatists talk, you, I'm sure, call yourself a pragmatist in certain contexts as well. So I'm not saying like us as though you're not included in that, but a pragmatist might kind of insert pragmatic truth where a theist, or at least in the language that you're using in this case, would insert God. Interesting. I think noumena is a good word. Um, the distinction between noumena and phenomena, I think, is very useful. And you don't believe that it's a personal God as the atheist that you talk to may, will argue against.
Well, like since like every so it's weird because no description fully describe, like, you know how the noumena phenomena thing works, where the noumena is completely indescribable, yet every description is at the same time a part of the noumena.
Right.
So you end up in this weird scenario where personal gods aren't wrong, especially in the sense that every way we envision God is going to be a personification of ourself onto the objective somehow. And so like God is personal 100%, because at least in the way that we encounter him. But the actual God, like in his own realm, in the spirit realm, if I'm continuing in heaven, up in heaven,
Right.
doesn't have a beard or hands or any of that. But um,
Yep. And ironically or coincidentally, when I try and describe what noumena is, I like I like what you said as well, but I'll say something like in the mind, in God's mind, only God could know what the noumena is. Something along the lines of that. I mean, so I mean that may be a point of connection there.
yeah,
Um,
God. A lot of Christian faiths say God is synonymous with His own mind because God doesn't have parts. So, like, yeah,
that so here that might be an interesting, man. I don't even know if I want to talk about parts and wholes. I a month ago read Parmenides by Plato,
oh yeah,
and boy, what a confusing text. It's just talking about it. It talks about a part being one of the whole, and the whole. It essentially was like a thing of contradictions. I almost feel as though that was one of the starting points of logic and contradictions, the law of the excluded middle. Parmenides, when talking with Socrates and Zeno, constantly contradicted himself, and he would say yes to a question that would contradict his. And so I don't want to, unless you have something like on the top of your head about parts and wholes. I don't want to talk, but that makes sense that the Christian would. I mean, I think that that would be coherent or consistent at least, where the Christian says, "Well, God is the mind of God. Those are the same thing, right?
yeah,
God doesn't have a body. He's not extended. He's not part of space and time at all." Um,
yeah. It's
so yeah,
when talking about like the parts and wholes is hard because it's like oh no, what just happened? It's like if God is the like does God have parts in the sense, if God has parts in the sense that He's made of them, then the pantheistic sort of view kind of breaks down, or at least if you're pluralist about it, or not pluralist, but would it be particularist or something? I don't know the words, But if you believe in a lot of like separate, distinct entities that build a unity out of the whole, like the universe is a unification of a bunch of smaller stuff, and you could remove atoms and still have the same universe, if that's kind of how you're thinking about it, then the unified whole wouldn't exist and couldn't be the God that the Christians are talking about, because they're saying that he is a whole without any parts, that and like it's sort of be like what is it what's it? They're not God is necessary, so God would be the necessary foundation for all the parts.
On which all the other parts are built upon,
Yeah,
kind of a thing. Okay.
yeah. And so that there's like a pretty big distinction between the one and the many, and I think it's got a lot of contradictions, and you can end up in
Oh my
a
god,
big
dude. I
circle.
don't even I almost feel as though my unconscious created a defense mechanism where I didn't obtain a lot of the information because it was so confusing at first. Not saying that's a good thing that I did, but that's what happened when I
No,
was reading it.
yeah, I had a similar thing. There's a section. My favorite spiritual or religious text is called the Zhuangzi, and it's like the Zhaungzi, the
Sure.
The Zhuangzi.
Zhuangzi. Yep.
And in that, there's a pretty small. It's like a smaller section. It's like a page, but it just quickly breaks down the distinction between like subject and object. Between, it says this and that, so it's like talking about how you couldn't have that if you didn't have this, and this wouldn't make any sense to talk about if there wasn't a that to compare it to. And
Mm.
so there necessarily needs to be every sort of this in order to have a that, and every sort of that in order to have a this. And it's just like, it's really back, it's like says this and that so many times and back and forth, and it's like really short. It's not going to be, it's like it's gonna be less complex than the fucking Parmenides for sure. But it like, I had to read it like 30 times to even get close to trying to figure. And that was one that really, like, yeah, I felt my brain build a defense mechanism, and I had to like think about it and sit there. And it definitely got me to a lot of where I am, like a lot of internal processing and discussing it with people. And I would kind of think of that passage and intuit my way, um, like to the positions I hold today. Like we've talked about ontology and stuff like that a lot.
It's almost, we can almost connect it to last or 2 weeks ago's discussion about cognitive bias. And I was saying, I feel as though I can get past my cognitive bias. And where you responded, well, that's a cognitive bias, most likely. But doing these activities, like reading these confusing texts, noticing the defense mechanism that may be a part of us, trying to get past that is one of the best things I think that we can do, um, in terms of at least understanding our cognitive bias. Zhuangzi, is that Chinese?
Yeah, it's Chinese.
Okay.
Um,
So I talked with Don Don about translation from Hebrew to English. Do you notice, perhaps, in your pursuit of Eastern philosophy, we can call it, not that you know Chinese or Mandarin, I don't think, but do you think that there are certain things that are lost in translation when it goes from Eastern language to English?
Absolutely. I tend to agree with, I think it was Quine who kind of had the idea that there is no such thing as a perfect translation or a good translation, even. It's kind of like you're restating a similar idea in a different context, but it's going like, I mean, one of my favorite things about a lot of the translations of the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi and the Lietza is that they tend to leave a lot of words untranslated. I mean, it depends on
Mm-hmm.
who you go to, because if you go to like a Christian translation, they're going to say God instead of Tao. And if you go to some other ones, will say way or truth or something. But there's a lot that say they'll say Tao and they'll say day, duh, or something like which is like virtue, something akin to virtue, not exactly. And there's just a lot of concepts that when you leave untranslated, it kind of removes a layer of the bias that will come if you translate it. But of course, there's still like I'm not an ancient Chinese person, so it's like I'm not gonna have the same connection with the words, and in the same way, like when I'm studying the Zohar, which I study people who are translating the Zohar. That's real. I'm watching like someone live translate the Zohar into English. I have to not only be aware of the English burden that's going, like I don't know what the burden even is because I don't know any of these languages like that, but I know there's going to be a heavy burden with the language. There's going to be a cultural burden, a time, but
The
like
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
my life is so much easier and just different than theirs was, that like none of the, I just know it's not meaning the same thing. And then a lot of the people are very upfront about that, and they recognize that there are words that we don't know what they mean. There's tons of words that, especially in Hebrew, that will translate as like wizard or witch or types of magic, necromancy, anything that talks about that. You can basically like guess that it's going to be like, we don't actually know if they're talking about necromancy. There's just this ancient Hebrew book that says this is banned, and then in like the second temple period, the when the rabbis started, because the rabbis didn't exist when a lot of those were banned, they started the rabbi like lineage, and then they started like deciding what these terms meant, and then would enforce that. And
Exactly. I was going to say, like, okay, we see that that something's being banned here, but what is it? What is
yeah,
it that's being banned? Well, they have to be talking about, the men who sleep with other men or whatever, because of their cultural biases. Yeah, shoot, what was the Dao? It's like
Dao, yeah,
an ancient. Did you say it was Chinese? Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
ancient
an
Chinese,
ancient Chinese man is going to have a different interpretation, not only of the modern day American, but of the modern day Chinese man too.
yeah.
Even though it's the same language or close to it. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know the evolution of Chinese or Mandarin, but
I mean, it's like reading the if you were to read the Poetic Edda, which is like Beowulf, or no, Poetic Edda is more like Thor and Loki and stuff. But if you were to read that or Beowulf like today in the original text, you could kind of pick out a few words because like it's the German that English is kind of based on. So you could get like, oh, that says Brune, which kind of sounds like brown. So maybe he's talking about like something that's brown here. Like you would get that sort of stuff,
mhm.
or like old English, or if it's closer, you'll get like an Elizabethan feel. But
Even that is dangerous. I mean, think of the German word Geist, another word that is usually left untranslated.
yeah,
Now, Geist sounds like ghost or geyser. Spirit is sometimes the most analogous that it gets to in English, but it's just one of those words that has so much baggage beneath it that it's not even worth translating.
Geyser's
Um,
a good one. I never thought of Geyser, and
so what Segru was saying when and I don't know if, again, I don't know if the word geyser etymologically came from the word Geist. It sounds similar, but the way that he analogized it, he made some very good and poetic analogy to Geyser and Geist and how they connect. I almost don't want to even take a stab at it and trying to remember out of respect, but um, it just goes to show you. I mean, even the words like Brune and brown, as you were saying. I mean, so does Brune mean brown, or is it just one of those things that sounds similar but has two different meanings?
I believe it means like my last name is Brown, and I have like Irish, French, Viking lineage, like all mixed together, and so like there's a lot of like O'Brien and O'Bron and Brown. Like I don't know, they're all like etymologically mixed together, and
Okay.
so I don't think they all mean the color brown, but I think brune means brown.
Yeah.
I think. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Well, cafe and maroon are
Okay.
brown in Spanish.
Yeah.
That's all I know. I mean, I usually do go with the etymology of a word if I don't know it. Now I know that there's a lot of pushback against that kind of strategy, but I think that it's helpful to go back as far as we can to see what they meant, at least, even if nowadays in our culture gives it a different usage to it. Um,
Yeah. Like God. God is I think it's like a 200-year-old word, and it comes from like the old German "topor," and so it's like an outpour, which is why I thought geyser and Geist was an interesting choice, because Geist is a lot of the time like spirit. It would be like spirit or essence sort of thing. And I think I want to say it's Kabbalists, because I know they had the Sephirot, but I know there's like Christian Kabbalism. And I think it talks about like an outpouring, like the noumena overflows and creates like emanations that will then themselves overflow into like another layer of
like
an
a guide
impure,
kind of thing.
yeah, like a
Yeah.
geyser.
Okay.
And so I don't know how old the philosopher you're referencing is, but if he's old enough, or if he was reading those texts, or Christian Kabbalists, or maybe even actual Kabbalists, because I
That
know
would
that they're
that
similar.
that would make sense. He just passed away a few months ago, but he was a Christian. He called himself. I am skeptical on exactly the Christian beliefs that he definitely believed in kind of the morale, the like the categorical imperative kind
Mm.
of golden rule part of Christianity and how we behave. I don't know exactly the ontology. He definitely believed in evolution and Darwin and that kind of stuff. So, but he was a Christian interpreter for the most part, so he definitely could have gotten that analogy of geyser from Christian cobblestone. What did he call it?
Kabbal,
Cobbleism.
or Kabbalism.
Okay. Okay.
The word, I think the word cabal is actually kind of, if I remember right, it's a racist thing where they took, because Kabbalism is like a Jewish thing originally, and so the word cabal for being like an evil group of like people, I think is a like anti-Semitic
It'd be derogatory.
origin thing. Yeah, I think it
Okay.
originates from that. But there were perennialists, which were like a Christian group that liked to read other religious texts and kind of Christianize them and then use them as a weapon to attack other religions. And so Christian Kabbalism with a C, that's Christian Kabbalism generally, and then with a K
Is
or
the
with a Q.
Jewish.
There's one that's with a Q, and I don't know the difference between. I don't know if one might be Aleister Crowley or something. I don't know. I forget. But
So
I think it's Christian.
this is interesting. The word God. Okay, so let's see. David Hume lived from the early 1700s to late 1700s. Died 1776 when Declaration of Independence was signed. What word was he using for God? Deity? I mean, what word were they using? Not just him specifically, but just English speakers at that time. If God is more of a new kind of word.
Well, I can look up the exact year. God, it might be 300 years old or something.
Okay.
But
But what word before that?
they,
Whatever it was. I mean, was it deity, Dios?
I mean,
Uh,
it may have been a like antecessor to the term God. It may have been like so I don't know, the good. That's probably not it, but I don't know.
gotcha. Yeah.
But that's something I'd have to look up. I know that a lot. Oh wait, Gott. Those are more
That's
see.
German. Yeah,
Yeah, it has to like because it is German. It's a
that
word
makes
that
sense
comes.
then. That makes sense that God would come from Gott or Gotthheit, which is Godhead. Okay.
Yeah, I think they both like there was an old Norse word that they both came from
This is
originally.
this is Vikings again. Norse is Vikings.
Yeah, they did. I know the Norse did a lot of invading. Part of the reason
Damn
why,
your people.
well, like I learned a little while ago, but I'm like so there's like I'm related to the James name. My grandma's maiden last name is James. I'm related to Jesse James, but it goes back to like the King James, like the family James, and Brown and Riddell, and there's a few other names that I'm associated
Wait, you're
with.
related to Jesse James, the sprinter?
No, the not the sprinter and not the monster truck driver.
I was
The
gonna say you're related to a black guy. Like he's like pretty
no, the like the outlaw Jesse James, the
okay.
one who holds the record for like the longest running from the cops or something.
Okay.
but but yeah, that's same name, like family name is King James, and Brown and O'Brien is like is like when James. Well, originally it's all France, so it's like the Vikings invaded France, and then that they kind of became the like a group in Normandy. The Norman France became like Viking French, and then like I forgot his name, his Baron Bastard something in 1066 invaded England, and that like the reason that French is a fancy language in our culture today is because they became the aristocracy,
The
and so
elite,
all the rich people spoke French because they took over everything.
right?
But that, yeah, I forgot why I'm on this line of thinking. But yeah, there's
We were on God, and you said the Norse perhaps had a different or had some effect on the etymology and evolution of the word God. It makes
yeah,
sense in German, Gott, Gott. Uh, it it would come from that. I mean, English is a Germanic language, no, right?
yeah,
So, okay.
yeah. I think I was just going off about nothing. But yeah, point is they invaded a lot.
And then, I mean, further invasion. You said this was 1066, but I mean, at some point, further invasion happened from there, from France, right? And they went around the world trying to invade other places and colonize as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and
The Roman.
perhaps, yeah, that colonization also surely had an effect on language and how it's changed over time. Um,
You know,
I
and
I always, again, I kind of insert pragmatism the way that I see some theists insert God, and language is uh, it's a pragmatic activity to me. Everyone's going to have a different interpretation of God, of of anything, of the good, morality, whatever the case may be. Um, I've heard you. I brought this question up with Don Don because we had a conversation about dichotomies. You're very anti dichotomy.
I don't think that. I
Okay,
think
go ahead.
that there's a lot of distinctions that aren't real. There's a lot of dichotomies that just are false, and then there's a lot of things we don't know are separate that we think of as a unitary whole that should be like divided and split apart. Like the distinction between humans and animals. I would say that's a false dichotomy. We are
Oh yeah,
animals.
we are animals, thousand
Yeah,
percent. Yeah.
and but I wouldn't say that the distinction between um, I don't know, let's say animals and plants is like that. That's useful. There's a point where we meet and we're the same. So at a certain level, it becomes a trivial distinction. But outside of that level, like yeah, we should even though it's like almost technically not a true like that we're all life, we're all the same thing, but it's a useful distinction, so we should use it. Plants and animals are different, and
Exactly.
but I do kind of use that sort of language a lot to like when I don't know. I think that's just how I learned to identify when I feel that something is like false in a specific way. False in a way that it's like distinguishing between things that don't need to be distinguished.
So you say that it's not real, and I agree. To a, I mean, I don't know. I don't think any of our language that we use is r- real in the sense that it's describing something one to one.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is any language that can be used where it is real?
Nah, I mean, if there is, I don't think we've discovered it yet. I
Okay.
think it's gonna take a while. Maybe the closest thing would be like I mean, I'm tempted to say mathematics,
Yes, that's probably the closest thing that we can get. Right.
but even then, like if you're saying math is talking about real things, then it's like you can't like what do I what can be pointed to that's math? I don't know. It ends up weird because nothing I actually experience is math
Right.
outside of like numbers on a board. I don't know. What is
No, I
math?
mean, not even that. I mean, even those are just squigglies, but we, again, here, here I insert pragmatism to these foggy these fuzzy areas that, what's going on here. You've never seen a three crossing the street. You've never seen, I mean, this I call circular, but it's not a circle, of course, right?
Yeah.
It's rough around the edges. So I agree with you there. Truth is based on the pragmatic use. Using 2 plus 2 gives us 4. Was that useful? Did that get us somewhere? Yes, therefore it's true. I think you and I share pretty much the same sentiments when it comes to that. I know you and I have battled a lot about the social landscape, or what did you call it? Social landscape? Is that what you called it?
Something like that. The
There's a
ontological landscape,
there's a landscape
landscape of priors, maybe.
of yeah, maybe something like that. I don't know. I've seen a tendency out of you to want several things to be true at once. Something along the lines of that. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I think I would say um, yes to all of that except at once, because
Okay.
I think when you adopt, it's more like I want them all to not be false at once, but
Okay.
they can't all be true. It's not even. I mean, I guess it wouldn't even all. I don't want one to be true and the rest to be false, but I don't want one to be false and the rest to be true, or any of that. I want them to all kind of maintain a plastic state of me being able to like do whatever I want with them in the given
Context.
in the given context kind of thing.
Okay. That makes sense. To take the analogy, I would imagine that certain propositions have a higher peak on this landscape than the other ones that are still above the line of truth, and they're still existing on the truth side. It's not like they're dipping below this medium into the false side. They're still peaking up on the truth. But this one, the 2 plus 2 equals 4, is going to be, I mean, it's tough when we use math since we just said that's probably the closest thing to being real. But if I say, this pillow is white and you say this pillow is gray, both of them are existing higher up above the line of truth, but one may be more truthful than the other. Would you agree with that extension of the analogy? Or are
Mm.
they still kind of all on the same height of truthness? And just depending on the context, depends on whether you use it or not.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the context. Like the lighting in the room
Sure.
changes my answer to
True.
the color of
If
the
the lighting
pillow.
is green or gray, yeah, okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
And so like I think
that's
there's
a good
definitely
point.
going to be assumptions that I like there's probably assumptions I think I let go of and I fail to, or there's assumptions that I don't even know that I'm holding. So I think I've let go of everything, but I'm still standing on a mountain peak somewhere in this landscape of assumptions.
Right.
Um, but I guess the goal is to be able to let go of them all.
So it sounds like the context is also heavily dependent on a meta context of your assumptions. Your assumptions are going to also determine that context, and that context is later going to determine the truthfulness of these certain propositions on this landscape.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Again, I love pragmatism for this reason. It almost it's such a good exercise to try and deconstruct yourself and deconstruct the assumptions and be aware that are assumptions that you won't even be cognizant of. But it's almost like I can just smuggle in pragmatism and say, oh, well, regardless of my assumptions, I got this result. I like it. It's good. It's useful. Therefore, it's true. Um, Enough about pragmatism and language. Though, of course, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say gut. Enough about the gut.
Yeah,
Gut.
enough about Gut and Gott, God and good. Though, it might come up in this next question about morality and nihilism. I've heard you talk about nihilism, and I see another observation of mine with certain tendencies that I see with nihilism. Well, first of all, how would you describe nihilism? There's so many different definitions that
Yeah.
I've noticed. How would you kind of bring all of this together? All of
Well, I
those.
guess nihilism generally is going to be like the denial of either statable facts about X or an essence about X. But there's lots of different, like if we're talking morality, like moral nihilism.
Yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Yeah, that's going to be moral facts aren't real or don't exist, which um,
Do you believe that?
I mean, yeah, I think again, like I since I live on this like landscape of different priors, I think if I take different priors, I can end up in either zone. But there's also like there's certain idea types of not there's certain ways of thinking moral facts don't exist that I don't agree with, and there's certain ways of thinking morality is an objective fact that I don't agree with. Like divine command theory. I'm not going to believe that actually I could get to be divine command theory, but if God's commandment is held in this book that was written by a dude 300 years ago or whatever, and I have to like trust that the book somehow contains the lineage of the word all the way down, even though it's 5 languages over and whatever.
The translations, yeah.
Yeah, translations, and not Peter, Paul was an
Oh.
asshole. I was gonna say it.
Well, Paul was uh, perhaps the creator of Christianity. Maybe not. Maybe he was the God-inspired apostle that you know that was so influential on Christianity and necessary. I could also argue for a divine command theory. I could just say that God exists similar to Geist, where it's like the intersubjective realm and the space. Even over the internet, you and I are having this intersubjective space communicating with each other. And that communication is God. And depending on a moral situation that you and I would agree on, that would be a moral fact. And that would be something that exists now independently of you and I. If you and I, God forbid, were to pass away in the next 5 seconds, that would still exist as a divine command theory of moral facts that now exist, uh, independent, objectively, you know, however you want to square that circle. Um, Objective is another very confusing word. Here we are going back to language. What is your, and we'll get right back to nihilism after this. What is your understanding on how you would use the word objective?
Well, I generally mean like the other than subjective,
Gotcha. So you're
not
taking it from,
also
yeah.
subject.
Yes. Okay.
But I also know that there's the it's the goal, like the objective is the goal,
There's
and
that one as
I
well.
think
Yep.
yeah, I think that term can also work where it's like when I'm speaking objectively, I'll say atoms are objective, but it's like it's our goal to figure out more. Really, that's what I mean when I say atoms are objective, or if I say the scientific body of truth is an objective fact or something.
There's a third one. Well, there's much more, but there's also another one that you'll find on Oxford, and I think it will be maybe the first one that comes up, which is uninfluenced by emotion.
Mm.
Observable, you observe it, and it's uninfluenced by emotion, that observation. So you can say atoms exist objectively, and it is our objective to study atoms through an objective lens of observing independent,
Yeah.
uninfluenced by our emotions. Um, it's a homonym.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason I don't use that is because I don't believe that we can be separate from our emotions.
No, I
But,
don't believe so either.
but, uh, like, yeah, it does kind of get into fishy water when it's like, how does your emotions affect your perception of a ball bouncing down a hill or something like that?
Right. Um, and so to get back to nihilism, I imagine you mentioning divine command theory as an example was you using the word objective as separate from the subject. That's what you just explained, right? So
Yeah.
that makes sense. Do you think it would still be a nihilistic tendency to come to a moral fact? Or here we go, here's a better question. Can subjects create moral facts with
Yeah.
each other?
Yeah. I mean, if I tend to think if moral facts are objective in any sense, I wouldn't even know what that would look like.
Fair.
Like what
Yeah.
because objectivity is indescribable, and that's kind of been the center of my whole thing. So if anything subjective is objective, because anything we perceive or think about or can encounter is to me, at least in my opinion, is going to be subjective because we're subject to it. We're the subject. Then, like what it looks like on the other side of like the subject objective barrier, I think would be necessarily divorced from our perspective of it, and so it becomes like if moral facts are real, then how do you know that your descriptions of moral facts equate one to one to the real moral facts? And so you
Right.
end up in the same sort of problem where it's like, yeah, even if I'm a divine command theorist, I can't see God's mind. I guess I can't see. I
I was
can't
going to
add.
say, it seems like we could bring it back to your description of God, where it's like the noumena and
Yeah,
we can't perceive it. Um,
even though all of our perceptions are of it, and
are necessary upon God and
yeah,
unnecessary upon the noumena. Very
and
Kantian of you.
is it? Yeah, well, yeah,
Very
we're using noumena and for not. Yeah, it's going to
right.
be pretty Kantian in the
Yeah.
language.
Yep. What about Kant's moral theory? Do you know much about it?
Yeah, the categorical imperative.
Yes.
So if you don't believe everyone should do X, then doing X is wrong.
Correct.
It's kind of like a reverse of do unto others. It's like instead of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, it's if you wouldn't have the others do unto
Yes.
you.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. No pickpocketer wants his pockets to be picked by other people. Um, I think it's super useful. Uh, or actually, what I would rather say, I'd flip it, kind of how you just did. I would say, I notice that when people don't abide to it, it's super not useful. It's not useful when there's some alternative where someone's acting heteronomously, is how he would say it, or unrequited, one sided. Um, and that happens a lot. I think that a lot of people do things that they themselves wouldn't.
Yeah, I think there's a negative side to it, but for the most part, yeah.
Let's hear it. Let's hear the negative side.
Yeah, I think there is going to be a point where the power structures that be or whatever the fuck, I don't even know how
Hmm.
the systems that we've created, if they don't do enough for everyone, or if a bunch of people are hoarding the power, or if there's enough trauma and pain going around, then I think you have more rationalization. I think Kantianism can lead to, and also the golden rule, also just in general, can lead to a sort of pacification. And I think it's been weaponized as a sort of pacification of the masses in the past. And there's
Like
actually
Stalinism. Is that,
probably, I
is
don't
that what you're
know.
referring to? Okay.
I'm thinking of when there. I forgot the name of the guy. There was like a British aristocracy person, may have been a king. I don't remember. But when they were colonizing Africa, he like wrote to the clergy in Africa to not try to get the native Africans to believe in God, because they already believe in God, but instead to try to get them to believe that God loves those who are poor and who like don't who follow the rules and are meek and are like, the meek shall inherit the earth. That all that stuff, just amplify all that stuff up to 10, and then all the stuff about you know uh, fuck the church, all the stuff about not going, like it's fuck the people with all the money, and camel through the eye of the needle to get to heaven if you're a rich person or whatever the fuck.
And that ended up being a net negative than otherwise.
Well, even if it didn't, it was intended as like a weaponization of religious narrative to
Gotcha.
oppress people, probably based on race, just given the time period. Just
So,
it was like 1700s.
did that aristocrat intend for that to be a weapon, or was it a weapon as a consequence?
No, it was. I'd have to find the specific. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it was one of the few slip ups where it was like a letter that got lost in a book, and then they found it, and it was like a letter from this king or lord or whatever, saying to basically word for word to weaponize the religion and use it to oppress people.
Do
And
you? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not one to say that religion is a weapon that is used to oppress people. I'm more of a religious person than at least I used to be. But there are people who will weaponize religious narratives to manipulate people, just like there are people who will use political narratives to manipulate people.
Do you think that that aristocrat, if he were one of the people in the tribes of Africa, would he have wanted that to happen to himself if he were one of the Africans?
No, I think he would be. I think he was probably he. I bet money he read The Prince by Machiavelli.
Okay, so there you go. Then that means that he's not following the categorical imperative then.
No, true. This was like, uh, yeah, he wouldn't. But I don't think, like, obviously, everyone who preaches the categorical imperative or the golden rule uses it, and I think you can kind of preach it in such a way that you weaponize it to oppress people. I
That
guess.
yeah, that would be that's exactly what Machiavelli did. You know, he would want to seem good. It doesn't matter whether he actually is good or not, as long as the people think that he's good. That's all that matters. Uh, I think that that is anti-Kantian,
100%.
uh, and the aristocrats and the elites and the high-end capitalists, I think, abide to that Machiavellian type of ideology, and I think that communism and socialism abide more to the Kantian morality and kind of worldview. Uh, Communism in the past has gotten a terrible rep because I think that the leaders ended up being Machiavellian. Um, do you think that communism can ever work? Or do you think that something better than capitalism and democracy could ever work?
I, uh, I mean, I honestly think like I think you could be like a fully communist or fully capitalist society, and it work either way. I think
Hmm.
it just
Gotcha.
there's going to be other factors that you need to make either system work, and I'm more pro whatever works. So I generally preach a mixed economy. Like I'm generally like I mean, a lot of what Don Don says speaks to me. So anything that doesn't follow a supply demand curve doesn't make sense to have in a capitalist economy. So, like healthcare, you
You
need
should
that.
not, yeah, you should not be monetizing healthcare. I agree.
Doesn't matter how much debt it's going to put you in, you're going to get it. You're
Right,
going to do the thing.
right.
So anything that is mandated that you pay for and that you have to take time out of your like your schedule to accomplish it. So like uh, uh, like your vehicle, getting car insurance. Like if that's a law that everyone has to have car insurance, why not just universalize car insurance? And then it's not something people have to do at all anymore. You give jobs, you create a whole network of jobs of people who make sure every car is insured, and you take the burden off the people who have a week to week paycheck already and survive and are just trying to survive.
How about
And the,
taxes? How about taxes? I mean, you get
yeah,
punished if you don't take the time out of your day to get down to the exact dollar. The IRS knows how much money you owe, but for whatever reason, they won't tell you. You have to do your homework, do your taxes. Why not just create jobs for other people to tell you what you owe? You pay that money, boom, less
yeah.
than 10 minutes out of your year.
You could do it all through income tax. You don't need anyone to ever have to think about taxes, except for when they look at their check, they'll be like, "Son of a bitch,
Right.
only 25%,"
Yep.
or whatever. But I'm pro that. I'm like, I would rather not. I would rather be able to go to work and go home and focus on my life than spend part of the, like, what, I get a third of my life at home because 2/3 are at work, and that's probably, on the light end.
Well, one third you're sleeping, if that's
Yeah,
what
and
you mean by at
yeah,
home. Yeah.
and I sleep at home,
Right.
not at work. So it's like, and so the few hours I get, I have to spend on these little things, and I think that that is ridiculous. And then I could go on about this for a while. I could talk about the banks close at 5. The average workday ends at 5. What are you
Yeah.
doing? What are you doing?
So, but what about this supply and demand curve of a car? You'd be fine with that.
Yeah, maybe you could universalize some sort of transportation. I don't know,
Oh, sure.
but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think it
Yeah.
needs to be cars that need to be universalized. Maybe you could have like a government upkept self-driving taxi service or something. But that's
Give it a few more years for something
yeah,
like that to be practical.
yeah.
Um,
At least let Tesla try and either succeed or fail first, and then maybe one day we could have the commie version.
get the Beetle, essentially, like in Nazi Germany when they were offering Beetles to everyone, or the Volkswagen Beetle to everyone.
Yeah,
Um, okay, so it sounds like you want to dip your toes in several pies, which I think is what America does for the most part. I mean, we have certain social security and disability, right? Our friend Thomas, for
yeah,
example, who will be on Tuesday for an interview. We there's still a disjunction though, I think, with the whales at the top, who are acting heteronomously, to put it again in Kantian terms, um, or Marxian terms, right? I mean, people produce something and they get less than 100% of what they produce. I think that's crazy to me. Um, but
yeah,
but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just saying, is communism better than democracy? That might be a confused question because there's so many different aspects and things that we need to take into
yeah.
consideration.
Democracy and communism aren't opposed in the same way that like capitalism and democracy aren't opposed. I think that democracy has failed in communist states in the past a lot of the time because generally the people setting up communism are the people in power, and so once it's not like when they're through setting it up they're gonna give up any of that power.
Right.
And the goal, my understanding, the goal in communism is to get to the point where everyone's equal in power, and that's why you'll have communists say that communism never worked. You'll even hear communists say that communism isn't about big government. Like, you don't want to have big government because you want every people just to be doing all the distributing of goods from like a ground level.
Yeah.
But I
That
don't
sounds
know.
scary too to me,
Yeah, I
honestly.
don't think that that's realistic at large scales.
Right.
I think we could, like, if we Republican, that term's poor. If we do the conservative, that, like, a lot of conservatives want to distribute power to like local levels, and there are a lot of people on the left who want local levels to have more power, and then you to have like the echelons of government to have less power as you go up the scale. And I tend to kind of agree with that.
Hmm.
I want the city government and the county governments to maybe not have more law writing power. I don't know exactly in what way I even mean that, but maybe just in governance power to some degree, because like maybe regulate. That's what I want. I want them to be able to regulate businesses in their local area, because I think some Actually, maybe that's not even true. I don't know what I want at that particular of a level. I
Well,
want something that works. I
so
know that.
something that Hobbes said is the only thing worse than government is no government, which is anarchy. Colloquially, that's what anarchy is.
Yeah, and I think anarchy could work if everyone was a good person.
I think, well, like you said with
And
communism, I think at smaller scales, anarchy can work, for
yeah,
example.
it's just that the moment that this group over here needs food and they have no one around to get it from, and they don't know this group, there's going to be a conflict. And then when you have no larger government, how do you solve the little conflicts that spring up?
What if it's a moral code, like the Kantian moral code, where if you see these people in hunger, well, if you were in hunger, what you wouldn't want to be gate kept food from, you would want them to share, right?
And that's I think the religion idea, the maybe not all religion, but a big part of a lot of religions is to like get and I guess just religious culture in general is to get like a shared culture that has those sort of ethics, either the golden rule or a Kantian sort of idea, so that people that will arise naturally. I think the idea is that you want that to arise naturally, and I tend to want that. Like, oh, the best government would be no government, and everything happens anyway. There's no like top down effort at all, and everything happens good, and there's nothing like that. I just think that that tends to happen so little. And at the moment you have any the moment you have any separation of goods by even distance, I think that it becomes a sort of a chest with a valuable worth taking that someone will try to take somewhere who is in need. So you
The
would have to have,
geography definitely plays a role in it for sure.
yeah, you would have to have a way of equally distributing everything to everyone, and they would have to have the cultural desire to not make that unequal, because the moment someone starts taking power, they get more power to take more power, and then
It's
we end
just,
up
yeah, there's a point of no return, right?
yeah, we end up here. They end
Yeah.
up creating a government or a religion or whatever.
So it sounds like what we're saying, again, depending on the context, depending on the setting, the geography, the people, the religion, maybe even the moral code will depend on how useful. Politics is it's just such a. I don't do my due diligence on studying it. It makes me angry. It gets me very emotional for whatever reason. And so I cower back into my philosophy lectures where I feel comfort and solace. Um, Heteronomy. I think a lot of people are heteronymous in politics, and that becomes an issue for me, at least. But I've been born into the society of capitalism and whatnot. I grew up in a middle class, pretty doing good for itself family. So, complaining may be heteronymous for me even to do, but um, we're at an hour. I'm going to keep it at an hour here. I'm not going to go beyond that. I have, just to maintain stamina for my next two interviews. We will have another conversation, I hope, at some point
I hope so.
later on. I won't tell you, as I told Don also, that I wouldn't tell him my motive for these interviews, which I will tell later on. Um, but I appreciate you coming on. You're a great mind. I have great respect for you. Um, Very high minded individual. And, I mean, we are, it's almost like we're opposites. We have like the same magnitude of brain power, but we're like on different sides sometimes.
Yeah.
And being able to like thread together and unify, I mean, it's very therapeutic, I'll say, at bare minimum for me. So
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it over text that we should speak more in person because I
Definitely.
feel like we disagree in text more than we actually disagree in person. And I don't know what that's about. Although I also think we've avoided a lot of like nihilism. Like I think there's a nihilism conversation we can have where we disagree. I forgot there was other ones. I know there's other
Probably
spots.
language, maybe,
I
or
feel like we always agree with how fuzzy language is. But like
true. True.
I tend to think nihilism is a position that works. I think if you fully embrace the lack of meaning, it can become a wind that in your sail that like pushes you forward. Whereas a lot of people use Geist or they use meaning as the wind to push their sail. So when they lose that, they stop moving. But if you are like a true nihilist, the lack of meaning becomes the wind that pushes the boat, and they go the same way that you would if you weren't a nihilist, I guess. But I guess we can do that.
It may even be the case that I am a nihilist, though I'm just not acknowledging it, even though I'm practicing the same tendencies. Um, I mean, again, I would. There's so many different usages of the word nihilism. I would call myself a nihilist in depending on where the conversation takes us. At least with meaning and the fuzziness of language, I think we have to act as though there is meaning in that sense of meaning. There's also the meaning of morality and the meaning of life and that sort of usage of meaning. But I think that we act as though there is meaning with the language and the symbols that we use, whether nihilism is the case or not, whether there isn't any meaning and we're just making sounds and barking at each other. I mean, we act as though there is meaning. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I guess I would say that you wouldn't act any different either way, and
Okay.
so um, the like two birds tweeting, there might not be any intended meaning from any from there might not be any or maybe the meaning doesn't match. Maybe there is an intended meaning and there is a received meaning, but there's no meaning being carried through the fabric of reality to one another. It's all mental. You can kind of divvy it up in a bunch of sort of ways. But if you want to go like completely nihilist, then I think yeah, it's just kind of you're a rock rolling down a hill, and everyone else is also a rock. Just some of them think that they're animate and that they have souls or whatever. That's kind of the perspective you'd be taking. Is you're all golems without spirit going about executing commands, but and like robots. But some robots act as though
Mm.
there's something within them that is separate from the actual mechanics of the meat suit that's going on or whatever.
Determinism and free will is probably the other thing that you were trying to think of on where we or like have conflict and
Yeah.
disjunction with. I mean, listen, there are times where I have nihilistic tendencies, and I look at myself in the mirror, and I use my left eye to focus on my left eye, and I just think to myself, we are all determined to use this language, which I know you have. Uh, there are certain issues perhaps that you have with the baggage that comes with determinism, but sometimes I think that there is no meaning and we are just robots, as you mentioned earlier. That's what made me think of it, you saying robots. But either way, whether that is the case or not, I act as though I have freedom to say meaningful things, for example, and I can have intentions. um, Whether that's the case or not, I mean, I'm very conflicted. There's two sides of me. One that looks at myself and I'm just a bag of meat that is rolling around due to physical causes. And then there's the spiritual kind of side of me that believes that there's some essence driving me, my rationality, my mental geist that is, you know, manifesting myself in reality, however, whatever poetry you want to include there. Um, and there's we'll I mean we'll end up talking about this
Yeah,
for
next
as long
time.
as we know each other till next time,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. I mean, it's not worth, again, we're at an hour, it's not worth going through this conversation and spending 10 minutes on it. I mean, this deserves probably an hour itself at least. um, but I'm actually surprised that I didn't even think about that and bringing that up. uh, I'm kind of glad we didn't, to be honest with you, but
Yeah, it'd take up the whole hour.
it would take up the entire time. Anyways, I appreciate you.
I
Maybe
appreciate you. It's
maybe
good being
in
here.
maybe in like a month, less than a month, have Travis do his little. Oh, are you going to New York?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to go to New York. I haven't
Okay,
bought my plane ticket yet, so I still gotta do that. I was
okay.
gonna do that after this, actually.
Well. Anyway, it'll be after that show, sometime beyond June 1st. But
Dinesh D'Souza and Alex O'Connor, be there or be
that'll be a good
square.
one. Yep, we'll do a little plug for Travis. Get your tickets. Type in Travis Pangburn. I'm sure you'll find it somewhere along the lines of that. But anyways, till next time. Later.
See ya.